Well, welcome back. This is the fourth of 7 videos that is looking at business-driven risk. And what we've been doing in the last videos, we started this idea of cultural theory. And that cultural theory has impact on how successful your controls are. How people perceive your security controls will affect how effective those controls are. And we covered this slide in the previous video, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there talking about these kind of 4 underlying premises. Instead, what I'm going to do is go forward and talk a little bit about some underlying foundations, if you will, if you're going to evaluate cultural theory. And the first of which is this idea that people are stable, that they're consistent in their cultural bias, and that consistency applies to all areas of their life. So if they're at work, or if they're at home, if they're at hobby, if they're at sport, they have a stable view and a stable cultural bias. And there's a counter camp to this, if you will, where individuals and cultural biases are context dependent. In other words, your biases may be different at work and at home in a particular hobby, that things change. And you can capture at least part of this in what the current Allstate commercial, where they talk about a person being confident in doing X, Y, and Z, but when it comes to buying insurance, they're not confident. And that would be an argument for the mobility view, whereas the stability view would argue that if they're confident in those other areas, if they have a cultural bias in those other areas, that they would be able to overcome that in a new area. They apply the same tools that allow them to become confident. It's not a perfect metaphor I'll give you, but it gives you the differences between these two different views. So when we start to map this out, we actually start to break our employees into kind of 4 different groups. And what we're doing, the kind of vertical axis is referred to as the grid, and it's talking about how regulated or restrictive. Is this an individualistic effort, or is it a group effort? And then the second, which is horizontal, refers to bonding within a social unit, and to the degree to which there is bonding within that group, and the degree to which the group norms drive, if you will, behavior. So that leads to these groups, the hierarchists, the fatalists, the individualists, and the egalitarianists, I guess. And so you've got these 4 different groups that are out there viewing the world a different way, and I'm going to go forward to the next slide, which hopefully in a very pithy and more graphical way capture how these different groups work together. There it is. It just pops up on the side. And so there's actually a lot in that kind of diagram there. The first thing is to kind of capture the graphic. Where is the ball? So if you're a fatalist, nature is capricious. It doesn't matter who you vote for. It doesn't matter what regulations come down from the man. The ball is going to move to the left or the right, and it's very difficult to predict where that is. If you're the hierarchist, you have a different view. That there's a place for everything. That nature, as you look at the curve there, that the ball fits exactly where it should fit. Because nature has shaped it to this is where it should fit within that space. If you go down from that, you've got this idea that the ball has a place, but you don't really want to shift it, and you want to be fair to all as you're doing that. Tread lightly on the earth as you go. And then finally, the benign nature over there, but it's an individualist approach to that, not a group approach to doing that. And they're looking at the bottom line. What's my ROI associated with a particular approach? So again, there's a lot to this particular chart. Hopefully the graphics display that. Hopefully in your life experience, you've run into people that fit into each of these different groups, you know, the hierarchies, which are very structured in terms, and very trusting if they're told by an authority figure to do something. The fatalists, who it doesn't matter, I'm doomed no matter what. The individualists, and so on and so forth. So you get a sense of these four different rationalities associated with viewing now security documents that come down to them. And if you go back and look at these four, and we go back and look at again where we started with this idea that we're trying to do risk analysis and we're trying to do risk mitigation by putting controls in place, the question becomes, how does each of these groups look at that risk identification phase, estimation, and evaluation? So we're looking back into, if you would look on the chart, that kind of middle part there between initiation and mitigation. How are they going to react to that, where we're going out and identifying risk? And so the hierarchists are going to go look at, well, what's best for social order? What's best for our users? At the other end, the fatalists are not looking for this. Remember, you're doomed, and you can't control it. Nature is capricious, and so why would you engage in risk identification? You just ignore it, and if nothing, you're trying to undermine it because again, you're doomed. Whereas in the middle, you're looking at a sense of either equity or you're looking at threats to personal freedom. Okay. And so, you know, again, if you're that individualist, you're kind of balancing where's my cost analysis, as I mentioned on the previous slide, against the excursion into my personal freedom. And then, for that middle group, we're looking for a sense of equity. We're looking for the ability to participate, and that there is a negotiation that takes place as we're doing this risk identification, estimation, and evaluation. And so as you look at this, you start to see some of those themes. You've got at one end of the spectrum, I'm going to trust authority, and I'm going to trust the experts that are working on that. You move over to the left, and you've got this group that says, I don't trust them, actually, and I want to participate in it, but I do trust the group. And as long as I can participate in it and be involved in it, then things are going to be good. The third group wants to participate in it, but they're looking at it through a different set of lens or bias in terms of where they're going to make their judgment calls. And they do want to do a cost benefit analysis as they're going along and willing to do the trade. You get to the fourth group, they don't want to be involved at all. So again, it's kind of interesting. The first group and the last group are less interested in participation. The two middle groups definitely are interested in participation, but in different ways. All right, well, very good. So we've talked a bit on this slide and actually in this video about cultural bias, and we've introduced the idea now in a kind of more meaningful way, and we've talked about it during that middle tier. We're past initiation, and we're looking at risk identification, estimation, and evaluation, and how these different groups relate to that. What we're going to do in the next video is spend the entire video looking at risk mitigation, okay? And looking at that, how do we design, implement, and monitor those controls, taking these biases into place. All right, so keep on studying, and I'll look forward to seeing you. This is the fourth of 7 videos looking at business-driven risk, and specifically here on cultural theory. What we'll do in the next video is look at cultural theory as it applies to risk mitigation.